In 18th century London, capitalism was booming, and money, as an important symbol of wealth, was assigned a value beyond its inherent worth. This distorted value system was driving society into madness and chaos. Our story begins with a sudden whim from a pair of wealthy brothers. They wondered, what would happen if they gave a poor person a cheque for £1 million? The elder brother believed that if the cheque couldn't be cashed, it would be meaningless to the poor person. However, the younger brother thought that just possessing the cheque would be enough to change a poor person's fate and lead to a prosperous life. With differing opinions, they decided to make a bet. They withdrew a £1 million cheque from the bank. To put it into perspective, £1 million in the 18th century would be equivalent to approximately $400 million today. The mere issuance of the cheque made headlines. With the prop in hand, the next step was to find the perfect candidate for the bet. The brothers sought an honest, intelligent, poverty-stricken foreigner who was unfamiliar with London. The requirements seemed a bit harsh, but fortunately, as soon as they opened their window, they saw a poorly dressed man. He tried several times to pick up a discarded pear but was deterred by the stares of passers-by. It seemed they had found a starving yet resilient poor man. Excited, the brothers immediately invited him in for a chat. The man's name was Henry, and he was down on his luck. Originally from the east coast of the United States, he had been blown out to sea during an ocean adventure. He eventually found his way to London aboard a British merchant ship. Upon arriving in London, he had only $1, which he lost within 24 hours. He sought help at the American embassy but was not only denied assistance but also humiliated by a stingy and status-conscious clerk. After hearing his story, the two brothers were overjoyed. Henry was the perfect candidate for their bet. Henry was a bit confused as the two mysterious old men handed him an envelope, instructing him to open it in exactly 1 hour and 10 minutes. He thought that the envelope must contain a few pounds intended to dismiss a beggar, but given his current situation, he couldn't afford to turn down any charity. With the envelope in hand, Henry entered a cheap restaurant and was seated in an inconspicuous corner by the owner. He placed the envelope on the table, preparing to gamble. If he won the gamble, he would enjoy a feast. If he lost, it would be a dine-and-dash situation, plus a few days in jail. Henry ordered ham and eggs, a large juicy fried steak, and a big glass of beer. Seeing his shabby attire, the waiter feared he wouldn't be able to pay and served him reluctantly, with a cold expression. Henry ate voraciously, quickly cleaning his plate as if it had been licked. After finishing, he still had time, so he ordered another round. After the second feast, Henry felt satisfied. When it was time to pay, he nervously opened the envelope, only to nearly faint after a quick glance. It was £1 million. Henry was dumbfounded for a whole minute before handing the cheque to the owner. The owner stared at the cheque, his mouth agape wide enough to fit an egg. Soon, the owner's wife screamed. A banker confirmed the authenticity of the cheque. It was real, and only 2 such cheques existed in all of London. The owner's attitude immediately took a 360-degree turn. He bowed and smiled, his face blooming like a rose. Henry was still worried about paying, but the owner said, "It's our greatest honor to have a gentleman like you visit our humble establishment. We wholeheartedly thank you and there's no need to pay." With that, he bowed deeply and watched Henry leave. Henry realized the gravity of the situation. The 2 old men must have mistaken £1 million for £1. He needed to find them quickly, or else he'd be in trouble with the police. However, the guards said they had already left for a trip abroad and wouldn't return for a month. Henry suddenly remembered there was another letter in the envelope. It read, "This £1 million cheque is loaned to you for 1 month." Still puzzled, Henry couldn't tell if the 2 old men were up to something malicious or if they had good intentions. With no time to think, he figured that as a millionaire, he should at least change his attire. He went to a clothing store, feeling somewhat uneasy since he was technically holding a worthless cheque. If he tried to cash it at the bank, there would only be 2 possible outcomes, being sent to a mental institution or ending up in a police station. After some consideration, he chose a cheap, earthy yellow suit. Then, in a low voice, he asked if they could put it on his account since he was afraid they wouldn't be able to break the large sum. The store clerk disregarded him, which gave Henry the opportunity to show off. He casually took out the £1 million cheque, and the clerk, after a glance, thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The expression on his face was an incredible mix of disbelief and amusement. The store owner took the cheque, and the sheer amount momentarily blinded him. Once he came to his senses, his face revealed a greasy obsequiousness. With trembling hands, he removed the cheap suit from Henry and measured him without allowing him to say a word. He then ordered clothes for all 4 seasons. "You never have to pay," he said. "It's our greatest honor for you to wear our clothes. Once they're ready, I'll have them delivered to your residence." When he learned that Henry had no place to stay, he offered a recommendation. He informed the hotel owner that a millionaire American was coming. The owner was flattered and nervously began making arrangements. He asked the Duke to vacate his wedding suite, which was to be redecorated with fresh roses and musk. The Duke, a man of stature, was upset about being forced to change rooms and give up his space for an American. Was an American's money more important than a British noble's reputation? This country was truly in decline. However, upon hearing that his room fee would be discounted, he obediently moved out, admitting that money was indeed more important. Soon enough, Henry moved into the luxurious wedding suite. Soaking in a comfortable hot bath, Henry felt elated. To go from a homeless person to a millionaire in the blink of an eye was something that could only happen in dreams. However, he knew deep down that continuing like this would eventually expose him. But he had a good attitude, thinking, who cares? Enjoy it one day at a time and let it be. With no psychological barriers, Henry changed into the high-end attire sent by the clothing store. He walked out of the room looking dashing, and everyone greeted him. Whenever he visited any store and showed that check, almost every shopkeeper would let him take whatever he wanted without having to pay. Henry's story soon made the headlines, and the entire city of London knew about this new character. All the nobles were eager to befriend this millionaire. Before long, Henry was invited to attend a noble gathering, attended by well-known figures from London. They greeted him warmly and politely, as if meeting a longtime friend. Admiring glances and compliments came easily because of that check, which made Henry seem like a distinguished gentleman, even though he didn't have a penny to his name. The most beautiful noble lady at the party invited him to meet privately. Henry was certain he had encountered the loveliest girl in the world. The girl had an indescribable charm and playfulness that was simply wonderful. She captured Henry's heart, and the two stood close together under the eaves to shelter from the rain. The romantic atmosphere spread quickly, and the girl got down to business. Her mother was passionate about charity work and hoped Henry would be interested in it as well. Henry thought he was the one who needed charity, but facing the girl's subtle hints, he had no choice but to agree. He attended a charity auction for an orphanage, feeling extremely uneasy throughout the event. It wasn't that he lacked compassion, but that he really had no money. Yet, every time he hesitated to bid, the girl would look at him with encouraging and expectant eyes. It was no wonder, considering he was the richest person in the room. Accidentally extending 5 fingers, Henry was taken to have bid £5,000. The girl was very pleased with him and couldn't stop smiling. However, spending money felt great at the moment, but the thought of repaying it felt like a funeral pyre. As the bills piled up like snowflakes, Henry began to toss and turn, unable to sleep through the night, even contemplating running away. But when he thought of the girl, he lost heart. "I'm an honest man, and I must tell her the truth," he thought. Henry was invited to the girl's house, where her name was Portia. He wanted to find a chance to talk to her privately, but the American ambassador arrived with an American businessman named Hastings. Hastings tried to cozy up to Henry right away, claiming he knew Henry's father, old Henry, which was pure nonsense. Henry didn't want to listen to his bluffs and took Portia under the moonlight. He tried several times to tell her the truth, but she said, "I know what you want to say, and you don't have to worry about it. My answer is just as you hoped, and I think as you think." It was probably the most wonderful love confession Henry had ever heard. There were no misunderstandings, only heartfelt confessions and pure love like moonlight. At that moment, not kissing her would have been a sacrilege to love. On the way back, Hastings kept talking, but Henry didn't hear a single word. He was lost in sweet fantasies about beautiful Portia, a romantic wedding, a wealthy and comfortable life, lots of children, and the pinnacle of life. When he arrived at the hotel, Henry realized that Hastings had been talking to him. Hastings had to reintroduce himself. He had a gold mine at the Cape of Good Hope, with piles of gold, but his funding was difficult to sustain. He wanted to raise money in the stock market but needed a gimmick. So, he planned to use Henry's name for publicity. This way, not only could he save his own life, but also make Henry a fortune. Henry thought that if he could make money without spending or exerting any effort, why not? The two hit it off right away. So, Hastings bought 20,000 shares of the Cape of Good Hope gold mine stock in Henry's name. The news spread quickly that millionaire Henry was bullish on this stock. The promotional effect was explosive, and all the players were boiling with excitement. They scrambled to buy the stock. The gold mine stock soared, and its market value multiplied several times, continuing to appreciate. In the meantime, Henry was unaware of this and was on a date with Portia. This time, he finally confessed everything. However, Portia didn't believe him and thought it was a test. She angrily said, "I don't care if you have money or not, but I do care if you think there's a difference between having money and not having any." Upon hearing this, Henry immediately realized that she was a good girl who didn't care about money. So, without further ado, he decided to be with her. Hastings informed Henry of the soaring stock prices. With Henry involved, it didn't matter if there was gold in the mine or not. Henry didn't spend a single penny and simply lent his millionaire reputation, earning more than £15,000 on the stock market. However, when Portia heard that Henry had made money through such an unfair means, she became angry and walked away. Henry chased after her, but he was rebuffed. As Henry became more and more famous and arrogant, the old duke who had initially been forced to vacate his room could no longer bear it. He learned from the waitstaff that although Henry was worth millions of pounds, he was unwilling to give even a single penny as a tip. How could such a stingy person be a millionaire? He wanted to play a prank and teach the annoying American a lesson. So he conspired with the waitstaff to secretly hide the check under the carpet. Stealing or destroying it was meaningless because everyone knew the check belonged to Henry. After doing all this, the old duke began spreading rumors that Henry was a fake millionaire and didn't have the £1,000,000 check. Everyone enjoyed gossip, and the news spread like wildfire. The press was the first to smell the news value of the story and forced Henry to display the check. When Henry opened his empty wallet and stood there dumbfounded, a camera captured the moment. The whole of London learned about this explosive news. The millionaire turned out to be a pauper. He had been eating, drinking, and taking things for free for almost a month, and the entire city had been deceived by him. With such sensational news, Henry went from being a respected gentleman and millionaire with a glowing reputation to a liar. In an instant, he became infamous, notorious, and known as a big swindler. When the walls fell, everyone pushed, and the first ones to confront him were the hotel owner and the clothing store owner. They demanded Henry pay up. He knew this would happen sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly. He suddenly remembered that besides the check, he also had investments in the stock market. However, the current stock market was in a terrible state. As soon as the news of Henry being a fraudster came out, people began to sell their shares frantically. The gold mine stocks plummeted, and the market value evaporated by several £100,000. As soon as Henry entered the stock exchange, he was thrown out by angry investors. The hotel was filled with people seeking an explanation. Everyone was only concerned with one thing, whether the check had been found or not. Henry argued, "The cause of this tragedy is your unwise decision to place your bets on my reputation and a piece of paper with no actual value." But people would never admit their own foolishness, short-sightedness, and opportunism. Instead, they blamed the person who told the truth. The hotel owner had already started cleaning the rooms, preparing for new guests. The clothing store owner sent someone to take away all of Henry's clothes. If it weren't so indecent, they would even want to strip the suit he was wearing and take it away. The instigator of the prank, the humorous old duke, finally realized that the joke had gone too far. At this point, the innocent victims who had suffered losses were gradually losing their sanity. They screamed and cursed, their words filled with threatening intimidation. All sorts of vulgar language burst from their mouths. But not long ago, it was these people who had praised Mr. Henry wholeheartedly. Calls for revenge rang out, and some people started to vent their anger with violence. The situation was spiraling out of control. Fortunately, the Duke appeared in time, producing the magical check. The Duke generously admitted, "I had someone do it. I just don't like Americans, and I especially don't like the way you flaunt your wealth." Henry forgave the Duke, and the situation gradually calmed down. After showing the check, people filed out and rushed to the stock exchange. The scene of people buying gold mine stocks like crazy was about to happen again. Their memories were as short as those of goldfish. Henry once again became the charming gentleman. The most ridiculous person was the clothing store owner, whose behavior was simply laughable. A month later, Henry returned the check intact. The two old men concluded, "As long as you have such a small piece of paper, you don't need to exchange it for cash, and you can have everything." However, Bowser said, "That check indeed has great power, but it's not omnipotent. You should know that I love Henry because he is Henry, not because of that check. And when I found out he was a money-grubbing rich man, I left him. When I found out he was an honest poor man, I returned to his side. True love is priceless. The two old men were still arguing that without the check, the poor young man could never have met the noble girl. But Henry had already left with Bowsy. He had made a lot of money in the stock market and could take his goddess to live their own happy life. It tells the story of a wealth fantasy that almost everyone has had. After becoming rich overnight, fame, prestige, and love all came one after another. It seemed as if having wealth meant having everything. Some people say that this movie fully explains the Matthew effect, for whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. When Henry was poor and destitute, no one was willing to spare him a penny. But when he became a millionaire, everyone actively gave him money. This is precisely the cold-hearted capitalism that Mark Twain satirized, where the entire society's value orientation is all about money. If a person has no money, all their good qualities are considered cheap, but if you add a halo of wealth to this person, all the good and bad things about them will become noble as well. The person hasn't changed, what has changed is people's blind worship of wealth. If in the movie, people's worship of money is blind and fanatical, then in reality, its manifestation is much more concealed. When I had no money, I despised all materialism. But when I have money, I hope everyone is materialistic. Well, that's it for today's commentary. If you like it, remember to follow, like, and leave a comment. See you next time.